Thank you. So, where do I start? I guess this story really begins back in 2009 in Tanzania, East Africa. It's mid-morning and the sun is beating down relentlessly on the parched land. My vehicle is bucking wildly as my guide drives too fast over uneven terrain. We are desperately trying to keep up with a lioness because she has stolen my camera. I now realize that it was possibly not such a good idea to attach my expensive camera to a remote-controlled buggy in an attempt to get close-up photographs of African animals. I mean, what did I think would happen? As a wildlife photographer, my dream is to show people a vision of nature unlike anything they've seen before. Something that makes them say, wow. But the reality is that in a competitive world filled with talented photographers, capturing anything unique is extremely difficult. And wild animals can be rather uncooperative. Ahead, the lioness eventually tires and drops my beetle cam. That's what I've called this remote control creation. We draw closer, and she backs off her prize just enough for us to be able to reach out and hoist it back to safety. The camouflage cover is soaked in sticky saliva. I remove it nervously, wondering what damage has been done to my camera underneath. It has 2 big incisor holes in the back and 2 more in the front. It will never take another photo. I remove the memory card and I'm relieved to find it's undamaged. A tooth had missed it by the narrowest of margins. I insert it into my laptop, the pictures load, and this is what I see. This is the last thing you might see before becoming a meal for the most powerful predator in Africa. On publishing this image, I found that people really took notice. It was a perspective that was rarely seen at the time. I saw how a single image could capture people's attention, and my purpose in life became clearer to me. Through my photos, I want to inspire people to feel reverence towards nature and to care for it. I also learned some valuable lessons which would serve me well time and again in the future. That often the greatest accomplishments are realized where the margin between success and failure is at its narrowest. And it is always worth stepping out of your comfort zone to try and pursue something new, because the risks of failure are far outweighed by the rewards of success. Now, shortly after this, I quit my job to focus full-time on my photography. But where could I go from here? What would be my next big idea, my next break? A couple of years passed, and I photographed lots of incredible species in exotic locations around the world. But nothing quite achieved the same level of excitement as this image. Every now and then I'd pick up the mauled remains of my camera and dream of close-up images of African animals. Perhaps I should dust off my beetle cam and try again. And so, in 2011, beetle cam returned. And it now sported a strong shell, which I hoped would be lion-proof. The photos I achieved this time were much better than the first batch, and the media response was also much greater. I learned a new lesson. When you find something that works, something that resonates with people and gains traction, double down on it. Don't get bored, lose interest, move on to something new. Focus on it. Keep striving to do it better. Push yourself to go further, and your efforts will compound. You can turn a fleeting achievement into something that lasts. Of course, that isn't to say you won't still encounter some challenges along the way. The next year, 2012, saw the emergence of the drone. The perspective they enabled of floating over the Earth was new and enthralling. I was incredibly excited. These were basically aerial beetle cams. But the technology was still in its early days. I had to build a drone entirely from scratch and then hang a camera underneath. The first consumer drone that would work straight out of the box was still more than a year in the future. I started to use my drones to good effect in Africa. But there was a problem. Early drones were not reliable. Furthermore, within a short space of time, drones quickly became commoditized, and soon the perspective was commonplace. 2 years later, I stopped using them completely. Ultimately, I spent a lot of time, effort, and money developing my drones, and today I don't have much to show for it. Trying new things doesn't always work out, but that's okay. We learn from failure, and if we continuously strive to push boundaries, then it is almost certain that we'll fail some of the time. If you aren't risking failure, then can you really achieve anything noteworthy, something that hasn't been done before? After drones, I returned to BeetleCam, keen to see what else I could achieve with it. Another technological advancement at the time was the much improved low-light performance of digital cameras, which made it possible to expose the night sky in new ways. I realized that I could use BeetleCam to compose photos with an animal in the foreground and the starry night sky behind them. And this became my new obsession. It wasn't easy, setting up lights, using guesswork to focus and compose in the pitch black, all whilst trying to avoid my camera being stolen by pesky lions. But with perseverance, I did achieve results. To show nocturnal animals, like lions, in this way, I feel is to show them in their true element, when they are masters of their realm. Now, BeetleCam had served me very well, but there was a problem with it. It could only be used to photograph quite bold and inquisitive animals that wouldn't be spooked by something unfamiliar moving through the long grass. But there were so many other creatures I wanted to capture this close-up perspective of. I needed a new tool to progress any further, and I knew that camera traps were the answer. These are stationary cameras that automatically trigger when an animal is detected in front. They can be left out for weeks or even months at a time to photograph very rare animals. And the great advantage for photographing nocturnal wildlife is that complex lighting can be set up in advance, allowing for creative illumination of nighttime scenes. Now, there wasn't a high-quality camera trap system in existence that worked the way I wanted, so I again had to create my own solution. My first camera trap sensor was a device originally intended for home security, which I modified to trigger a camera and then housed in a feta cheese tub. And after some trial and error, the cheese tub cam actually worked. I continued to evolve my camera trap system and apply it to my nocturnal wildlife projects. And that brings me to August 2018, when I found myself in Tsavo in Kenya. I had a bunch of my latest camera traps with me, and I was deploying them to photograph endangered black rhinos at night. I then had a fateful phone call, a single call that would change the trajectory of my life. The call was to discuss a possible safari itinerary. On the other end of the line, my friend, a veteran safari guide, was suggesting places we could visit. He then made a comment in passing. After that, he said, you could head up to Laikipia Wilderness Camp, where you may even see a black leopard. The comment stopped me in my tracks. Since childhood, I've thought that black leopards, also known as black panthers, are just about the coolest animals on Earth. But in Africa, they are so rare that in all the years I'd spent traveling the continent, I didn't know of anyone who'd actually seen one with their own eyes. To photograph one would truly be a dream come true. But the challenge was daunting. How could I get a photograph of a single animal in a vast wilderness that the guides at camp had only seen on a handful of occasions, and a leopard at that, one of the most elusive creatures on Earth? Surely my chances of success were close to zero. But I had to try. And so, a few months later, I was driving up to Laikipia in a car full of camera traps. On reaching camp, I could immediately see why this was fantastic habitat for leopards. Steep, craggy escarpments, gullies bursting with exotic vegetation, plenty of cover that a predator could use to sneak close to prey, such as dik-dik antelope and rock hyrax. The guides in camp told me about a few black leopard sightings they'd had over the past 10 years. But they then said that on the neighboring property, a black leopard had been seen fairly recently. My heart skipped a beat. I felt my dream was almost within grasp. And so the next morning, we forded a river to reach a neighboring property, and I was introduced to the owner, Louisa. She told us how she'd been out with her head ranger, Mohammed, when they had first seen the black leopard when he was still a small cub. They reckoned he was now about 2 years old. My guide then told me that at about this age, a young male leopard would usually be pushed out of his mother's territory by a stronger male, and so he might not stick around much longer. It seemed I was in a race against time to get a photo before he was pushed away. Perhaps I was already too late. I had to get my cameras deployed as soon as possible. Everyone was incredibly helpful, showing me places where they'd either seen the leopard or found tracks in the earth. I selected places for my cameras that I hoped would lead to striking images, carefully considering elements such as composition and lighting. Setting up took all day, and I returned to camp well after dark. But the next morning, I was up at the crack of dawn to check the cameras. Unfortunately, there were no leopard images. I decided to leave them running a few more days before checking again. The feeling of anticipation of what could be on those cameras was so sweet, and the fear of disappointment so great, that I was actually very reluctant to return to them. I did, however, return, and had checked all the cameras but one without any success. I opened up the last camera and was scrolling back through the pictures, not expecting to find much, when I reached an image that made me pause. I'd almost scrolled straight past it. The animal was almost invisible on the small screen. All I could see were the eyes. And in that moment, I realized what the picture showed. When you achieve a long-held dream, in the space of time it takes to flick from one photo to the next, it really takes a while for it to sink in properly. I felt pure elation and excitement. I also felt gratitude, because of course, this photo would not have been possible without the support of many people in Kenya. Indeed, this is the case with many of my projects. There are always people behind the photos. Conservationists who've dedicated their lives to protecting the animals, guides, scientists, rangers who helped me locate them, and I really owe everything to these people. After this, the fairy tale continued, and I managed to capture a few more pictures of the leopard in the days that followed. It was then time to return home and release the images. How would the world respond? I published a blog post, uploaded the pictures to social media, prepared a press release, and clicked send. The media response snowballed and far exceeded my expectations. For a while, this beautiful cat was world famous. Why did these photos resonate so much with people? I don't think it's just because the images are rare and the animals stunning. It can sometimes feel like the whole world has been explored and documented. I think the black leopard brought back a sense of mystery and proved there are still unexpected wonders out there. Now, the project didn't end there. For a while, I knew where there was a black leopard in Africa, and I was keen to make the most of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It came back to that lesson I'd first learned all those years ago with beetle cam. When you strike upon something that works, double down on it. Louisa had generously allowed me to leave my cameras running on her land, and so while this first batch of images was circling the globe, I was still capturing new images. My new ambition was a logical next step. I wanted to capture the ultimate photo I could imagine, a photo of the black leopard under a sky filled with stars in a single exposure. For the shot to come together, I had to overcome many challenges. Firstly, the moon phase needed to be right, and it needed to be a clear night. Frustratingly, it was often cloudy, so I captured many images like this. A big male spotty leopard was often around, which unfortunately kept the black leopard away. Almost as soon as I returned to Kenya, I actually got the shot I wanted. It was almost perfect, except it was of the wrong leopard. I had never been annoyed at capturing a beautiful photo of a spotty leopard before. There are other challenges too. One time I returned to a camera trap setup to find it had been trashed. Flashes were strewn around, the camera knocked over, wires cut. I surveyed the damage in disbelief, wondering what events could have preceded such carnage. The camera had survived in the housing, and I scrolled back through the pictures to find the culprits had been caught red-handed. The leopard was coming by much less frequently now, which meant I was getting fewer and fewer opportunities to photograph him. More than a month passed without me capturing a single image. I wondered, is it time to move on? But I decided I'd stick at it just a little bit longer. 6 months later, I was still at it. I was returning to a cluster of cameras. One was a spare that I'd set up to capture a behind-the-scenes image. I checked it first, and on it I found this picture. It seemed conditions had been perfect that night. Next, I eagerly checked the camera that you can see at the bottom there in the foreground. And on it, I found this image. The ultimate fulfillment of a quest. More than 10 years in the making. The ultimate stalker of the night. A creature that inspires pride in those that live alongside it, and wonder in countless others around the world. A creature that inhabits that space between dreams and reality. Thank you.